Slavery is a word that conjures images of chains, suffering, and the denial of human freedom. While many associate it with the American South, slavery was a common feature of the ancient world, including the Roman Empire. Comparing Roman and American slavery isn't just academic, it reveals the very nature of human bondage. In Rome, a slave could be a respected intellectual or skilled craftsman, sometimes even able to buy their freedom. In America, slavery was a rigid race-based system, hereditary and nearly impossible to escape. The logic and experience of each system were vastly different. This comparison helps us see that slavery was not a single, unchanging horror. We'll walk the streets of ancient Rome and the plantations of the American South to uncover the real lives and laws behind these systems. This is a story not just of suffering, but of resilience and the ways slavery has shaped our world. By understanding both, we see startling differences and grim similarities. Let's look beyond the familiar and confront the complex realities of slavery. Only then can we truly grasp its legacy. In Rome, slavery was everywhere, an accepted fact of life. Slaves came from all backgrounds: Gauls, Greeks, Syrians, even Italians. They powered the Roman economy, building aqueducts, serving banquets, and preserving knowledge. Legally, a slave was property, an instrumentum vocal, a tool that could speak. Masters had near total control, including the power of life and death. Yet daily life varied. A slave in the mines faced misery and early death, while a skilled Greek tutor might live in comfort and wield influence. Some slaves managed estates or businesses, even saving money, peculiar to buy their freedom. This possibility, though rare, shaped Roman slavery. A slave was a thing, but one who could sometimes become a person in the eyes of the law. The diversity of roles and the hope of manumission made Roman slavery complex, and in some ways less rigid than what would come later in America. The system was brutal, but not entirely without nobility. The Roman world saw slaves as both tools and, occasionally, as people. This duality defined the institution. It set the stage for a very different system across the Atlantic. American slavery was built on race, a system where African ancestry meant permanent bondage. Laws made slavery hereditary. A child born to an enslaved woman was a slave for life. Slaves were chattel, legally equivalent to livestock or furniture. Families were routinely torn apart at auctions with no legal recourse. Most enslaved people endured relentless agricultural labor, especially after the rise of King Cotton. Unlike Rome, there was little variety in roles. Most were field hands. The system was designed to be closed. Freedom was nearly impossible. Laws actively blocked manumission, making hope for liberation almost non-existent. The psychological cruelty was profound. Slavery was a cage with no escape. The American system's permanence and racialization made it uniquely harsh. It was a system built to last for generations, and for most it did. In Rome, slavery had many paths: war, piracy, exposure of infants, debt, or birth to a slave mother. War was the largest source. Conquered peoples, regardless of status, could end up in chains. Pirates and bandits also supplied the markets, and even free-born Romans could be enslaved by misfortune. Foundlings and those in debt sometimes entered slavery, but it wasn't tied to race. Slavery was seen as a misfortune, not a biological condition. In America, by the 18th century, the main source of new slaves was natural increase, children born to enslaved women. The law ensured a self-perpetuating system, making the womb a site of production. Unlike Rome's constant influx from conquest, American slavery bred its own workforce. The hereditary racial principle made American slavery more inescapable. In Rome, anyone could fall into slavery. In America, it was a permanent, racialized fate. The difference shaped the experience and legacy of both systems. One was a misfortune, the other a life sentence. The contrast is stark. Roman slaves experienced a wide spectrum of work, from the deadly mines and quarries to privileged roles in elite households. Some were worked to death in mines or chained to oars, while others managed businesses or educated children. Skills could mean better treatment and even influence within a household. This diversity created complex hierarchies and the possibility, however slim, of upward mobility. In America, work was overwhelmingly agricultural and uniform. Most enslaved people were field hands, laboring from sunrise to sunset under the threat of violence. The gang labor system maximized control and efficiency, leaving little room for specialized or intellectual roles. The American system offered almost no variation or hope for advancement. In Rome, a slave's fate depended on luck and skill. In America, it was nearly always the field. The contrast in work shaped the daily realities and hopes of the enslaved. Roman slaves could sometimes rise. American slaves were kept down by design. The systems differed not just in brutality, but in the possibility of change. For most in America, there was none. That was by design. In Rome, slaves couldn't legally marry but formed deep bonds that masters could break at will. Tombstones show slaves cherished these relationships, even without legal recognition. Children born to slaves belonged to the master, creating constant anxiety over family separation. Sometimes household slaves developed close ties with their masters' families, but the threats of being sold always loomed. In America, slave marriages were also unrecognized, and family separations were even more systematic. The domestic slave trade meant families could be torn apart at any moment. Slave narratives recount the trauma of these forced separations, used as tools of control. Yet enslaved people built resilient communities in the quarters, forging kinship networks and unique cultural traditions. They blended African heritage with new American identities, creating music, religion, and support systems. Despite systematic destruction, enslaved families found ways to endure. The human spirit persisted, even when the law denied their bonds. Both systems threatened families, but the American system made separation a constant, deliberate weapon. Still, community and culture survived. Roman law saw slaves as property, unable to own, contract, or testify, often tortured for evidence. Masters had near-absolute power, but over time, small protections emerged. Killing a slave without cause became illegal, and slaves could sometimes appeal for relief from cruelty. These changes were practical, not moral, and often ignored. Still, Roman law grudgingly acknowledged slaves' humanity. In America, the law was even harsher. Slaves were pure chattel, denied all legal standing. Killing a slave was rarely prosecuted as murder. The infamous Dred Scott decision declared black people could never be citizens or have rights whites must respect. The law was a weapon to enforce total control, not a shield. Roman slaves had a sliver of legal recourse. American slaves had none. The American system erased any ambiguity. A slave was property, period. The rigidity and brutality of the law set American slavery apart. It was total by design. In Rome, manumission was common. A slave could be freed by will, ceremony, or by purchasing their freedom with peculium. Freed slaves became citizens and their children were born free. Some ex-slaves became wealthy and influential, fueling social mobility. This constant renewal was unique to Rome. In America, early manumission was possible, but as slavery became more racialized, laws blocked most paths to freedom. Southern states made it nearly impossible to free slaves, fearing a large free black population. For most, escape was the only hope. Dangerous and uncertain. Fugitive slave laws meant even in the North, freedom was never secure. The Underground Railroad helped some, but it was a desperate gamble. In Rome, freedom could be a legal process. In America, it was an act of defiance. The systems offered different hopes and different cruelties. For most in America, freedom was a dream, not a right. Both Rome and America were shaped by slavery, but their legacies differ. Rome's conquests fueled its economy and allowed some social mobility, but also bred contempt for manual labor. When conquests ended, the system faded, leaving behind legal concepts that influenced later forms of bondage. Roman slavery wasn't racial, so its legacy is less visible today. American slavery ended in civil war, but its racial ideology persisted. Abolition was followed by segregation, violence, and systemic discrimination. The belief in black inferiority created to justify slavery outlasted the institution. Its legacy is seen in ongoing social and racial inequality. Roman slavery allowed for change. American slavery fused race and status permanently. The echoes of Rome are faint. Those of American slavery are all around us. Understanding both systems reveals the complexity of history. Slavery took many forms, but its chains still shape our world. To understand today, we must confront the past.